Hey Canucks fans, welcome to the Line Change. Now before we dive into our topic today, I want to give a quick shout out and thank you to my sponsor, Gassy Jack Art, maker of this fine artwork on display you see behind me. And you guys can check them out yourselves at gassjackart.com. You guys can also find him on Instagram at gassjackart. I will leave a link to his website in the description down below. Now on to our topic of discussion. We're once again going to be going over an article from our friends over at Canucks Army. And as I did in the previous video on Sidney Crosby, I'm not going to go over the entirety of the article, but I will leave a link to it in the description down below as well, so you guys can read it in full. But in this one, we're going to be talking Jonathan Lekkerimaki, as he recently spoke to Canucks Army on, I believe it was Thursday, and he talked about some things like the Calder Cup playoffs. He talked about that injury that he had during the playoffs, as well as his offseason and his offseason training. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into that and start off by saying he started off with his offseason, not necessarily his training, but just what he did in the offseason. He started out by just saying he spent most of his offseason back home in Sweden, in Stockholm in particular, and he just spent it relaxing with family and friends, which is fair to say. He did play a lot longer than most of the other Canucks, being in the Calder Cup playoffs. This I found to be surprising and intriguing. Surprisingly, he did not get a day with the Calder Cup despite being on the winning team. Now, for most winning championship teams, they get a day with the Cup. Obviously, it happens with the Stanley Cup. We saw it with Sam Reinhart. He actually brought it back to Vancouver, West Van in particular, and he had a day with the Cup. Same thing happens with the Calder Cup. I even saw a friend of the podcast, Brandon Astle, had a day with the Calder Cup. I thought that was pretty cool, but it seems like Jonathan Lekkerimaki didn't get a day with the Cup, and there was a reason for that. And it was, according to him, it was too far to travel for just one day. Obviously, he was in Sweden. He probably would have had to come to Vancouver or Abbotsford and, get the Cup and then maybe bring it back over to Sweden. And then I guess he only had one day with the Cup. So he decided to, it wasn't worth it, which is odd to say. Now, in regard to the Calder Cup run itself, Lekkerimaki mentioned he was very grateful for the experience. And this is a quote from Jonathan Lekkerimaki. He goes on to say, "It was a good lesson to see the team from the stands and when I was on the ice, especially to win in my first season over there in North America. It was a good experience." Now, let's dive into the injury. Now, obviously, people know at one point, he missed several games. And then when he came back, he was wearing a bubble or a face shield. So that injury, a lot of people suspected it was to do with his mouth or something. It was apparently he had an infection in his wisdom teeth and they had to be removed. Now, as someone who's had their wisdom teeth removed, that shit's painful. So I can imagine the amount of pain he was in, especially if there's an infection. I don't believe I had an infection, but I had to have them removed, and that was quite the experience. So he did admit that the injury did affect his play, and this is a quote from Lekkerimaki saying, "Yeah, a little bit, but next time I have to come back stronger from the injury and work harder after the injury." Now, let's move on to his offseason training, which he talked about, and he mentioned, and this is a quote from Lekkerimaki, "I trained with a good group back in Sweden, William Eklund, Noah Ostlund. We did a lot of workouts, but not that much skating." So he didn't do a whole lot of skating. "But I tried to gain some weight, which is good to hear. I tried to get bigger and stronger because the season's so long and you play so many games, especially in North America," which is good to hear. Now, perhaps we'll see if, I'm not going to say he put on, 13 pounds like Petey did. No, but apparently his focus was getting bigger, getting stronger. So hopefully we'll see some of that. Let's talk about his training camp and his mindset. This is his mindset. His mindset is, I want to be an offensive player, create some offense, and score some goals. Obviously, he scored a goal in that second prospects game, and it was a damn beauty of a goal. So, what do you think, Canucks fans? What is your reaction to him revealing what the actual injury was? That it was his wisdom teeth. He had an infection, and that affected his play, which you can understand it would affect your play if you had an infection in your wisdom teeth and had to have them surgically removed. Obviously, that would give you some discomfort. What's your reaction to him not getting a day with the Calder Cup? Do you think that was maybe a missed opportunity on his part? Now, you can't really fault him for that. It's, Sweden's a long ways away from Vancouver, so I don't really fault him for that a little bit, especially if he wants to spend a lot more time with his family, considering he played until, June? Or, early June? What's your take on his off-season training? Him, possibly getting bigger, getting stronger, not doing a whole lot of skating, but more so working on, physicality and, getting bigger, as I mentioned. And what are your expectations for Jonathan Lekkerimaki going into training camp? Obviously, that is this weekend in Penticton. What are your expectations, and do you think he can make the Canucks roster? Obviously, a lot of people are talking about that, and they, at this point, have him as the odd man out. They think it would be more practical for him to start in Abbey. I'll admit, I'm one of those people who thinks he needs, to start in Abbey, get some, I forget the term, but he needs to get some more experience in the AHL, and then maybe you call him up later on in the season. But that's just my take. That's just my opinion. Let me know what your takes are in the comment section down below. And as always, if you guys like this video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to stay up to date on all your Vancouver Canucks content, be sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you don't miss a single video. You guys can find us on social media, as you can see there. Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok. We're everywhere. Go ahead and give us a follow on all of our social media platforms. And if you prefer an audio version of this podcast, you can find us on both Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts. On Spotify, feel free to give us a follow as well as rate and review us. It is, of course, greatly appreciated. Really helps out the channel. And that's going to do it for this video. As always, let's go Canucks. Be kind to one another, and I'll see you guys in the next video.